Hello, this is Nick with Sonic Perspectives, and welcome to the inaugural run of our Talking Perspectives series. In this series, we'll be discussing new and forthcoming music releases, as well as a wide variety of miscellaneous music-related topics. In this episode, I have with me Sonic Perspectives main man Joel Barrios and fellow contributors Austin Coquel and Gonzalo Pozo. Welcome, guys.
Hello, hello.
What's up? Thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to doing this.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, this is going to be fun.
Now, we have a few topics here today, and the first regards a recent release. It came out March 30th via Mascot Label Group. Just talked to Ayreon Universe on the phone not too long ago. It is the new live release, Ayreon Universe, the best of Ayreon Live. You've all seen it now. Austin, let's start with you. Give us some general thoughts. What do you think?
Overall, I would give it like a 9.9 repeating. It's pretty amazing. There are a few slight technical problems here and there, but nothing like the theater equation. And I know Ayreon was kind of his own biggest critic with how that one came out. And if you've seen that one, you know what I'm talking about. It's just less than stellar at times. And the new Ayreon Universe release, gorgeous video quality. Camera cuts a little too quick sometimes. I think Joel said that recently too. And one of the biggest pet peeves that he pointed out, I noticed as well, that sometimes they'll cut to a wide shot that's out of focus. And I don't know if they were trying to be artistic or what, but overall I can overlook all of that because the set list was fantastic. The shortened versions of the songs I think worked tremendously well. The fill-in vocalists were top-notch backups. I think the whole thing was a really, really good release, and I'm glad I picked up the deluxe edition of it.
All right, yeah, and one of the things that I definitely noticed over the last couple of years is I don't know if I've ever seen someone so self-critical of one of his own releases as Ayreon was of the theater equation. I mean, he has just bashed that pretty heavily for an artist. But you did mention there was a lot of interesting vocal choices on this. Joel, did you have any favorites as far as people filling in on non-original parts?
It is really difficult for me to say about personal highlights. For me, are too many to tell. But if you had pressed me to pick one, I would say that Nick and Jonas' spine-tingling version of Comatose, which is by far one of my all-time favorite songs from Ayreon, and definitely Damian Wilson's appearance in the Drew's Storm to Stone, which is a far more touching, moving, perhaps more dynamic version than the one in the album. He starts so gently and then just explodes with passion, and then he does a sweet, small return to the gentleness. It is simply gorgeous, in my opinion.
All right. Gonzalo, how about you? Any favorites that you had?
Well, I don't know where to begin here. I think that hearing Abbey of Sin, even in its truncated version so early on in the set, was a really, really big highlight for me. I commented to you guys just how nice it was to finally hear that song live. I've never heard any recording of it live. I don't believe Stream of Passion ever performed it. I don't believe that Star One has ever performed it. So hearing it in this setting with Robert Soderbergh, he sounded fantastic. I think he sounded a lot better than he did in the original recording 25 years ago or whatever it was. He sounds on, and it was a real treat hearing that. It was also a real treat hearing like the original mellow cut of Valley of the Queens. When I first rediscovered that song, it was when Stream of Passion did their live DVD, and Marcella did a duet on that. Marcella Movio did that duet with her sister Diana, and they heavied it up a little bit. And I absolutely love that arrangement of it. Hearing the original arrangement in the live setting with Annika was a treat that I have no words for it. Marcella's on it, or Jansson's on it. I can't think of better female singers. I love these women. They sound amazing.
Yeah, so going off of what Gonzalo is saying there, I would say on Valley of the Queens especially, when I saw the Gentle Storm at Prague Power, I got to see them do it, and I was super thrilled about that. That was like a highlight being performed there. So to see it like performed even better at the Ayreon Universe show, that was a really big treat. And then Austin, you had some comments on the vocalists?
Yeah, the one who really just knocked it out of the park for me and was just kind of a sort of a dark horse, out of left field sort of thing was Maggie Lighton. I had never heard of her before your interview with Aryan, and I wasn't sure what to expect from her, especially because I knew she'd be splitting some of Russell Allen's parts with J.C. Kuipers. And she, to me, she sounded like an angry ghost who died from drinking a milkshake full of shards of glass. I mean, her voice is just so raw. I love it. Like, she sounds like she doesn't have her voice is shot, but it's not. That's just how it sounds. And I actually looked her up, and apparently she recently joined a French kind of thrashy prog metal band called Nightmare, and they just put out a new album with her, I guess, this past fall, and I was listening to bits and pieces and watching videos. It's pretty good. It's it's almost like a Symphony X, but like lighter. And again, she brings that same kind of intensity and just that raw vocal harshness, but without going like growl. It's a really cool timbre she has. And I thought she was great on, Intergalactic Space Crusaders, and basically anytime she was on stage, my ears perked up. So kudos to her.
I just wanted to add that Arjun joins in two songs, The Castle Hall and Amazing Flight in Space, to a very suitable, loud, and rousing welcome from the audience. And truth be told, and I hope that he listens to this podcast, he certainly seems more an experienced showman rather than the stage-anxious musician he claims to be.
Well, one of the things I would say is fans often see him that way, but I think it's one of those things of how he feels and how he listens back to his performances. I think he's always been more self-conscious and worried about it more than the fans have ever been. One thing that we hit on a little bit, and I want to go back to, was that so many of the songs were shortened. And, when I was seeing it live, I thought, I caught little things here and there, but really it wasn't until I got the release that I understood just how much had been cut down to make all these songs fit. Did you guys, I'll start with Austin, have any thoughts on, any particular cuts that you liked, or just the general thoughts on those cuts?
I think overall it kept the pacing at a good kind of jaunt. It wasn't. The songs didn't feel shortchanged by the cuts. It wasn't. You get one chorus, then it's out. It wasn't like a medley or something. And I think if you're getting the full versions, not only would they have not been able to include the variety that they clearly wanted to, but the whole show would have gone on much longer. I almost think to a fault. So I do think the cuts worked. That said, it would have been nice to get maybe a full version of maybe one of the longer songs, like The Day That the World Breaks Down. I think, obviously where it features every vocalist on the source, that would be more difficult to pull off. But I think something where it's like a good 10-minute song, just let it go all the way through, would have been really pretty impressive.
Yeah, and I generally agree with those thoughts. I thought it went very well, but I certainly wouldn't have minded hearing one of those longer songs, like you said. Now, Gonzalo, do you have maybe any particular song that was cut that you think you would have preferred to hear longer? Was there one favorite that you wish you would have heard more of?
Yeah, there are two songs from Actual Fantasy off the top of my head that were both truncated. Abbey of Sin, which I mentioned earlier, and Computerize was also cut short. And those two songs in particular, I don't know why they hold a spell over me, and I don't know why they have held that spell over me for so many years. They just do. And I did feel a little shortchanged that they got cut set. I totally get why they wanted to do that. I mean, this is like the listing that I'm looking at includes 28 songs, and I totally understand why they would want to cut some of these songs short. I'm just a little disappointed that it was those two, that got cut. And another thing, Dawn of a Million Souls, I kind of understand why they wanted to cut that one, because really, who can play Michael Romeo other than Michael Romeo? That's a tough act to follow. Those two songs from Actual Fantasy, like, I would just love to hear them in their entirety. I do know that that Stream of Passion did play Computerized, start to finish during their tour, like, I don't know, 12 years ago, was it? Before the band fell apart, and that was great. But at least we have that. Abbey of Sin, I don't think it's ever been performed live.
All right. Now, Joel, one question I'm going to put your way here. They are performing at Grass Pop again later this year, and Ayreon did say that they won't have the exact same vocalists. If there was one person who wasn't at this show that you know from Ayreon's past that you want to see at a future show, who would it be?
Well, if I'm allowed to dream, I would say Bruce Dickinson. And don't get me wrong, Tommy did a fantastic job. His interpretation of Into the Black Hole is flawless. And putting together a production like this with so many singers and personnel involved nearly borders in madness. I cannot even begin to fathom what took to bring this idea from conception to inception. It's truly probably the biggest production that I've seen. And even when I believe that probably Bruce Dickinson could be an unreachable dream, I would love to see him singing his original part.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is an actual fact, but I believe it is. I think Iron Maiden is playing that festival as well. I don't know if it's on the same time or if they have other dates around there that, would conflict with the day that they're each playing. But hey, we can all dream and hope for some fan video from that. So we'll move on here in a second. I saw Gonzalo. Any final thoughts from you?
Well, I mean, regarding what Joel just said about like this dream production of having every original singer perform their own song, that would be amazing. Mike Okerfeldt from Opeth can't growl anymore, so that makes me sad for many, many reasons. And we can't overlook the song "Loser." Mike Baker from Shadow Gallery sang the vocals on that one on the Human Equation back in the day, and he unfortunately is no longer with us.
Yeah, and really quick, I know Austin has something to say, but that song definitely hit close to home because I am actually local to Shadow Gallery, and I didn't know the guys at the time, but I legitimately saw Mike Baker's obituary in my local paper.
Wow.
And knew of the band at that time, was a fan at that time. So that was really, something that was sad, in this area and really hit close to home. And to see Mike Mills do such a cool job with the song was really nice and something that I really liked. So, Austin, you had something that you wanted to add?
Yeah, actually, it's funny. I wanted to talk about Loser as well. I feel like there are certain vocalists who are kind of permanent members of the Ayreon family after they complete their album or albums, like, Tommy from Camelot, Annika, obviously. Marcella. There are certain ones who just always come back, and then there are others like Neil Morse, for example, who they do their one album, their one contribution, and that's kind of it. And I feel like, I think a lot of who we saw on this release were those sort of Ayreon permanent alumni who always keep coming back. Some of them you weren't expecting, like some of the guys from the earlier albums, like Edward Reekers, for example. But I think by and large, you kind of knew who might be coming back. And I do think, like Joel said, like Bruce Dickinson would be amazing to see. I do think, even though we had James Labrie on the Theater Equation, it would have been nice to see him here. And again, I know they just performed that entire album, but Ayreon wasn't truly involved there. I mean, he was, but not really. And I think it would have been nice to get a little bit more of the Human Equation in this release. But I do think it's clever, like, for example, Devin Townsend, how, he's one of those few vocalists who insisted on writing his own lyrics. I thought it was interesting how they brought his probably 64-tracked vocal part to life with the Ayreon's Angels, the backup vocalists, kind of coming out and handling all that part. But the one part I missed during the Loser, go tell it in a bar section, is just the growl, that offbeat, the growl that Devin does. And I wish. I know they tried to bring it to life as practically as possible, as live as possible. But even if they had used a sample, it would have been nice to just have that offbeat growl during that moment of Loser. But I'm not gonna split hairs over such a small thing. But it would have been nice.
I gotta disagree on one point there. You've got 16 singers there. If you're using vocal samples, I gotta say no to that.
Yeah, well, there was no growling really. There was, nobody. I mean, maybe Maggie could have done. I don't know, but somebody could have gone, for, like on the offbeats, But oh well.
To be completely honest, I would have preferred to have heard somebody growling Devin's part at the very end of that song.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just sounded a little. The Ayreon Angels singing the growling part. It just didn't sound right to me. And I think that it would have been a lot more appropriate to just go ahead and growl it with somebody that's, and Ayreon could have gotten, Ayreon could have gotten just about anybody that he wanted. I'm sure that Devin would have been happy to do it, even for that just, for those few seconds of that song. But, I mean, that's just my gripe. I mean, like, overall, everything sounds fantastic. Everything is top-notch. I haven't seen the videos yet, but that's just, like, one of my very, very few gripes about this album.
Well, that's actually another interesting thing. Devin Townsend is also playing Grass, but no, that's not true. I made that one up.
Oh, don't mess with me.
So, okay. So, I mean, overall, across the board, I'd say we were all pretty psyched on the Ayreon Universe release. It was a monumental thing, and I think we're all quite happy with the fun result. We didn't even get to the documentary, which I think was so well done. But, we got other topics, so we're going to move on. But suffice to say, I think we all give that our recommendation going forward. So up next, we're going to talk about a lesser-known band, something that's coming up. We're talking about this before it's released. It's coming out April 13th via Gentle Art of Music. It is an album I did a review for recently. It is Frequency Drift, and the new album is Letters to Maro. Now, of course, I did the review, so I'm going to try to leave this more to you guys. I know Austin had some major reactions to this album, so I know I started off with you last time, but we're going to you again. Tell us what you thought.
I mean, man, I had the great pleasure to listen to it from start to finish last night in preparation for this chat. And I know Joel had posted the lead single off of the album maybe a month or two ago, and I watched that then, and I said, okay, this is going to be interesting. I want to hear more from them when we get around to it. So I've been looking forward to this, and it did not disappoint. I have never heard anything from them before this album. And I believe their lead vocalist is new to the band. Correct me if I'm wrong, Nick. And I believe this is the first album where they really don't use, heavy rhythm guitar at all. And I think those two things added a lot. I really love their use of the electric harp. It seems like the kind of thing that would normally be a little buried in the mix or midway in the mix. And it's a very important instrument on this album, and I like that. It reminded me almost like a cousin to Gazpacho in a weird way, where Gazpacho might go a little bit heavier, a little more rhythmic, a little more violin at times. This is I think the two complement each other very well, and this is I'm going to go out and buy this album myself, even though I've already heard it. A, to support this kind of creativity. B, just because I want it in my collection. I mean, like I said in my Facebook post last night, this kind of album that just catches me off guard is why I listen to music, because I'm always looking for something different and something new, but it's still familiar at the same time. But it's I really enjoyed it a lot, to be honest.
I just have to interject really quickly and say that as far as a musical family is concerned, my cousin Gazpacho sounds like such an Italian thing. Like, hey, look at my cousin Gazpacho over here.
I know a guy.
But yeah, when reading up about the album, I haven't heard their earlier stuff yet. But it did say that this album really did cut out those heavy guitars. Now, Gonzalo or Joel, did either of you have any? I think Joel might have any experience with the band prior to this album.
No, I simply haven't heard them, but would you like me to go on and go in my 2 cents about this?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, all right. So I first heard something similar to this really mellow take on proggish type weird stuff about, I guess it must have been in 2004. A friend of mine and I had gone to Monterrey to see some band called The Gathering. They have a chick named Annika on Gearsbergen singing for them at the time. Maybe you guys have heard of them. But we went to go see The Gathering in Monterrey, Mexico, and this band called Elfonia opened up for them. and their drummer and their bass player had quit the band like the night before. So it was just keyboards, one electric guitar, and a young lady singing and playing violin. Her name was Marcela Bovio.
Oh,
So, yeah, and this is before Stream of Passion. This was before Ayreon. This is actually how she linked up with Ayreon to do the human equation. But in either case, the set that they performed that night sounded very similar to what I heard from Frequency Drift. You know, just kind of mellow, spacey. You know, the Frequency Drift is obviously like less aggressive. I mean, there's, you know, I'm not gonna, you know, mince words about it. There's nothing metal about this at all. Metal's my background, but it was, you know, the backdrop was really, really gentle. However, I have to say that I'm not completely sold on it because vocally, it sounded like the singer Irini Alexa was taking these letters that she had written to Maro, and I don't know who Maro is, but she was like reading these letters out loud and kind of trying to like shove them in such a way that resembled some sort of vocal melody. And to me, it just doesn't. It just seems very, what's the word? I guess incongruent. It doesn't fit. You know, it doesn't
Sort of
sound
forced.
like to me. Exactly.
I
yeah.
would say I would counterpoint and say ethereal, but okay.
Well, to me, it just sounds forced. There was one rhythmic figure in the chorus to the third song, "Electricity," that I did enjoy, but for the most part, it was just kind of a block for me. I wasn't able to get past the vocals.
All right. Well, Gonzalo's done with this discussion. No, I'm kidding. But Joel, I know you had some good information on the background, so we're going to head over to you.
Well, I mean, this band has been around for quite some time, and this is probably, if I'm not mistaken, their 8th record already. And you know, after listening to pro rock for so many years, I have tried to steer away from the neo-prog bands mostly. I really don't enjoy the sugary stuff anymore. That being said, I find Frequency Drift as one of the most interesting bands out there. The rich atmospheric music that they create is one that remains as compelling as I've ever found. It's obviously music based on the typical formation of drums, keys, bass and guitars, but the instrumental and stylistical diversity in there is really something to be admired by any prog fan. This band has matured very, very fast from their debut album to a more cohesive collective, one that could be easily taken as a prime definition of modern atmospheric cinematic prog rock, if that is a genre. And this new album is one that I highly recommend. It's the kind of music that allows you to sit back, relax and enjoy. Some mixture of the mood of the 70s Pink Floyd with some cinematic and bombastic sounds and excellent female vocals. In my opinion, they are doing something different, as Austin mentioned earlier, and this is their first release giving away completely the use of heavy distorted guitars, and for me that really does the trick, and that really compels me to listen even more.
Yeah, and I agree with pretty much everything that Joel's saying, but going back to Gonzalo's point 1 second, as I'm thinking about it, I love Irini's voice, and I probably overlook it because of that, but at the same time, I can absolutely see why sometimes the melodies can seem like artistic for artistic sake, or a little over the top. I can definitely get where he is coming from like that, but I do love her voice. So let's go over, I know Austin has some comments. What do you got for us?
Well, the funny thing is when Gonzalo mentioned just a couple moments ago seeing Marcela Bovio and The Gathering, he made me remember one thing I thought last night when I was listening to it, that not the Annika von Giersbergen era of The Gathering, but rather after she left the band, the couple albums they've done with Silja Vergeland, I probably butchered her name and I apologize if she ever listens to this, the 2 albums they've done with her, specifically Disclosure, might actually be my favorite album by The Gathering, and there's the song Heroes for Ghosts, the epic from the album, that I've listened to probably dozens of times now. The entire Frequency Drift album last night actually reminded me a lot of that one song, and I think that might be why I connected with it, because it just reminded me of, again, one of my favorites from one of my favorite bands. And I feel like maybe not in phrasing and, like we've said, in terms of melody, but maybe in terms of vocal timbre at times, the two vocalists remind me of each other a lot. And also, I have to give Frequency Drift and, specifically, I'm blanking on her name, Arini Alexa, a lot of credit, because she took some really interesting risks, I thought, not just with the melody and everything, but the notes she would choose. There were times where she kind of hit the microtones in between two notes. Like, she hit all the accidentals along the way, going from like a whole step, up to down. And just some things that threw me off a little bit, but in a good way. Like, I wasn't expecting it. And she took some risks that I thought worked well. But anyway, yeah, long story short, I thought it was funny. It reminded me of the Gathering's newer material as opposed to their older stuff.
Yeah, and this is a prog discussion, it is when we're talking about microtones, of course. But in any case, yeah, we mentioned the electric harp. We mentioned, or I'm going to mention now, there's mellotron and mandolin, and those are nothing all that common in music in general. But then there was something called a wave drum, and I had to actually look up a video of this. Were any of you familiar with that prior to this album?
Nope,
I was not.
Okay, so it's a little drum, and it kind of seems like it works like an electric kit, but it's just one little drum, and you tap it with your hands, and depending on where you tap it, all the cool sounds come out. So I thought that was a really neat addition to the album, and something I hadn't seen before. But Gonzalo, I know that you didn't have. You're not completely sold on it, but what did you like about the album? What are the good takeaways here?
I really like the mellowness of it. I really like that it's really dreamy and escapey and ethereal. I really, really dig that about it. And I don't want to sound like I'm ragging on Arini Alexa. I mean, she's obviously a very talented singer. I just, if she had taken a different approach to certain things that she did, like the way, like that almost downward gliss that she does on the very first song during the word fall in the chorus. If she had taken a different approach and avoided so much of the artistic sake stuff, I probably would have appreciated it a little more. I'm going to give it a few more listens. It might grow on me. One of you guys just mentioned post Hanukkah Gathering. I really like the West Pole. I think that's a great album. And if you kind of get the same vibe from there, then this is definitely worth investigating more.
All right, Joel.
My final thought about this is an album bubbling with substance, which can be sometimes a missing ingredient in the mostly commercially inclined world of music. So for me, I would say that this is graceful, seductive, charming, and definitely something that you can immerse yourself into. To put it in a way, it pushes all the right buttons for me.
And I agree with that, and it was something new. I said in my review, it was kind of unlike anything I'd really heard yet this year. I will say this for people checking it out, because I don't think I made it clear enough in my review, is the song Electricity, which is the single to the video, is probably my favorite track. It is completely unlike the rest of the album in some ways. So while I love it, don't listen to that first and expect a full album of that. The rest of the album is much more drawn out, much more atmospheric. It's just as good, but you just don't expect that exact same style to translate to the rest of the album. I think that's a nice disclaimer that people don't hear that and expect that exact sound for the rest of it.
There are definitely some interesting surprises through the rest of it, though. Who's Master, the epic, I think really had some, again, things coming out of left field that maybe they worked, maybe they didn't. That's all subjective, but they were definitely interesting, and that to me is good enough in itself sometimes.
All right, so that was our discussion on the new Frequency Drift album, Letters to Maro. That's available soon, so go ahead and pre-order that from your favorite retailer if you want to hear it. And now we are going to move on. All right, so we've gone over two releases, one just out, one coming out. We're going to go back to the beginning of the year with a release at the end of the discussion, but I want to get to a nice general topic now. I love these just nice, big, flowing discussions, and I have a very big one for the last 10 years or so, and it is the resurgence of the vinyl industry. Now, I know that certain people here have a lot of vinyl. That would be Austin. I know some people here have a ridiculous ridiculous amount of vinyl, and that would be Joel. I know that I have some, and I believe Gonzalo has some, but I'm pretty sure there are two big collectors. So let me start here with Joel this time. Vinyl, you have a lot of it. Why do you love it so much?
Well, vinyl and I go way back. I mean, I vividly remember when I got my first ever vinyl in Cuba around 1993 probably. It was a British pressing of the Peace of Mind album by Iron Maiden, which by the way remains as one of my favorite records of all time by my all-time favorite band. Moreover, the experience of opening the beautiful gatefold and beholding the magnificent picture of the band sitting at this humongous medieval table with a human brain served as the main dish was a moment stuck in my head forever. I'm telling you, there's something personal about vinyls. There is something personal in the fact of owning a record, something that carries a cultural identifier, I would say. The presence of an album in your shelf says something about you. A playlist in your iPhone definitely doesn't. In addition, there's something essentially authentic about the experience of taking your recently purchased record out of the jacket and dropping the needle on it for the very first time. And it's great to see, by the way, that young people are clearly recognizing this and playing their own part in the vinyl revival phenomenon.
Now, I don't think anyone could have said it better. Joel pretty much summed up all the points I've ever heard of all the big vinyl freaks there. Now, Gonzalo, one question I'm going to put to you is, the CDs have been on the decline for many years. Music sales in that department have been on the decline for many years, and vinyl has kind of surged in the face of this. Do you think, long-term, that vinyl, the surge will continue and sustain itself, or do you think it's eventually going to turn around and kind of tank along with CDs?
For the sake of the bands and the musicians that are putting so much of themselves into creating this music for, just to entertain us, then I do hope that the whole vinyl resurgence does continue. I do hope that it spreads on into more than just like this. I mean, cassettes made a brief comeback. I don't know if they're still a thing like vinyl is, but I mean, vinyl's obviously a much bigger thing. If this keeps going, and if we go back to like actually selling like physical product, then it might be, then there might be a day in the future where things will kind of be like they were in the old days, but with some new lessons learned. And that possibility is a possibility that I would welcome. It kind of does seem like a fad. I'm a recovered vinyl file. I collected a lot of vinyl up until about 10 years ago, and I didn't stop for any reasons other than just like I just have like more important things to worry about. That said, I have some pretty valuable pieces of wax that you will not see me part ways with. But I do hope that this is a trend that continues because the bands stand to benefit, and that can't be a bad thing.
Mm-hmm. And now one of the things that Joel said, that having that album and the beautiful big artwork, I definitely get it. I own a good bit of vinyl myself. Some of it's old, dollar store cheap stuff from years ago. Some of it is, some more expensive newer pieces. But we're saying about bands benefiting from it, and one of the things that has bothered me that seems to have gone hand in hand with the resurgence is bands seem to make like 100 copy run of this color and a 200 copy run of this color and of the same album, and I don't fault them because bands need to make money. There's so many ways, but it just seems like there's a certain financial or merchandising end of the resurgence that doesn't sit well with me. Austin, have you seen that, or do you understand where I'm coming from there?
I do, and I'll admit it does seem like sort of a cash grab sometimes to me, and it is cashing in on the fad. The kind of people who will just go into a bookstore, a gigantic bookstore chain, and just walk right up to the vinyl selection, go, "Ooh, Adele," and there's nothing wrong with Adele, but that to me is just, it's kind of like a bench vinyl collector, a part-time vinyl collector. They're the people who are going to be out of it within 5 years, I guarantee it. But I think guys like, us, or even Gonzalo, who has, reprioritized his life a bit, if he sees something that's a one-of-a-kind treasure, he's still going to pick it up. That is more of a collector to me. And I'm not the kind of guy who's gonna go, ooh, I got to get the red copy of this from this band from their, whatever. But sometimes I'll make an exception to that. For example, Alice Cooper, his newest album, Paranormal, he did kind of a cool thing where through independent record stores, there was a limited edition blood red vinyl version only available at local record stores. And the one in my town got 2 copies of that in. So I grabbed it from them. I did it to support my local record store, and because I just thought, it's Alice Cooper. I mean, I'm perfectly okay with having that on vinyl. And it was one of those kind of worked out for everyone, I felt like. But yeah, a lot of time it's, where the record label puts out their exclusive orange and purple spatter version, and then the band has the purple and orange. It's too much for me. My thing, what keeps me coming back to vinyl is the antiquing aspect of it. To me, I feel like Indiana Jones when I go to a different city and I find a good record store I've never been in, and I'm like, all right, let's see what they've got, and I just start flipping through, and maybe I'm part of the problem that I'm just buying used vinyl as opposed to new vinyl, but I've gotten some really good stuff that I wasn't expecting to find, like Allman Brothers Live at the Fillmore East on the original record label, a German import of Live in Japan, Deep Purple. Just these things. I'm like, all right, well, I got to get that, and if you can get it at a good price and it's in pristine condition, it's like the Antiques Roadshow in your own little record store experience, and I love that about it. It's antiquing that you can listen to.
So we've heard from Indiana Cokel there. Now let's go over to Joel, because I know Joel has albums where he has all the different color combinations under the sun, and it brings me to another question for him: is of the vinyl you own, what percentage gets unwrapped and listened to, and what is those collector's items that are going to sit there and be in mint condition for the next 20 years?
I have a weird approach to this, but first let me clarify something. I believe that this whole phenomenon of the colored vinyl might be not so transparent for bands and made by labels and manufacturers instead. I have seen many editions of certain records out there that I don't really think the bands are even aware of them. There are records made by Nuclear Blast, and I'm thinking right now out loud, Overkill, for example. They have been out there forever, and I have seen nearly 20 different editions of certain albums by them. And I wonder myself, even if the band is aware that the label is putting out so many versions, and if they have a saying on it. That being said, certainly color vinyls are made in small quantities, and certainly they carry a collector's value. I've been collecting backwards, meaning going back to the roots and buying records that I grew up listening to for bands in the 80s, late 90s, and if there's something very special for me that come in different colors, I will buy the black one, and that would probably be the one that I will listen to until it wears out. And if there's, let's say, a gold or a clear one, I will buy those in case the record is one of my favorites, but just for collecting because it will remain sealed. They obviously have a collector value and probably will sound the same. The relationship between color and sound quality is a completely different discussion that we can even have in a different conversation. Which one sounds best? If the colored one or the black ones? Die-hard vinyl collectors swear by the black ones. Some other people say that the best sound comes from the clear ones because there's actually no color involved in the pressing. So to sum it up, if it is an album that I like to a normal degree, I wouldn't mind buying the colored one, I'll be happy with the black. Whereas if it is a record that I love to pieces, I would probably collect at least a couple of colored editions. Another detail, which is not something that I actually pursue, but is really nice to have, is when they match the color of the cover with the color of the vinyl. For example, if the predominant color in the cover is orange, let's say Haken with Visions, for instance, and the record is actually made in an orange pressing. That's really, really cool.
Mm-hmm. Now, that was a great answer to that, and, kind of backed up what I thought is that, a lot of time the colored vinyl is more likely to stay wrapped than, the black. It's more likely to be played because it's, of course, less expensive, less of a collector's item. But go on to a pet peeve of mine, and I'll wait for someone to try to convince me on this. One big problem I have with the vinyl Resurgence, and again, I have a good amount of it myself, and this isn't the band's or the collector's fault more as I find it the bands and labels not pushing it. But to me, we have, if we look especially at someone like Steven Wilson, Blu-ray audio that I think A, sounds better and comes out in 5.1, more channels, more options to do things with the sound. And I really think that should be the way of the future as opposed to going backwards to vinyl. I think it is more convenient, a medium, and I think it sounds better, and it upsets me to see vinyl doing so well, and that, only a few select artists get into that. Is anybody going to tell me I'm wrong? Go ahead, jump in.
My only thing with that is a lot of people listen to music on their phone, and if they're like Luddites like me, they will actually rip the songs into MP3 format and move it into their iPods because I'm old like that. I don't think you can do that with a Blu-ray without going through some loops.
You can't do it with a vinyl without going through some loops, though, either. And you can have a download code with a vinyl.
Doesn't sound good.
But you
can it generally doesn't sound good.
Yeah. And you include download codes with a vinyl. You can include download codes with Blu-ray releases. Austin, did you have anything?
I think it depends on the demographic, or maybe not demographic, psychographic, I guess, of the artist. I feel like and again, I hate to generalize, but I feel like if it's just a pop, top 40 kind of thing, there's no point to make a 5.1, 7.1, whatever Blu-ray release of that, because that's not the audience they're going for. Like you said yourself, the Steven Wilson collection, all the 40th anniversary remasters, or, all the kind of stuff that, let's face it, we and our listeners are into. That's the kind of thing that is going to get a 5.1 surround treatment, but it's sort of a niche market as well. And you're going to get people who will drop the extra money for that, but it's until they find a way to make it more portable and practical and not just a sitting on your couch home theater experience, I think it's a little bit apples and oranges. I mean, and so is vinyl. You're totally right. But yeah, I hate to say it, but it's anymore, with the way life is going, portability is the king right now, So I think both of these formats, it's kind of like no matter who wins, one of them's going to lose, and they both lose,
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt that, streaming and digital is the predominant media right now, whether we like it or not. Even Steven Wilson, who is a long fighter of it, has come fully on board with it. So, that's definitely the main competitor for anything. Joel, you had a thought?
Yeah, this is a polemic question about what sounds better, if vinyl or audio, Blu-rays or CDs. And I believe that it boils down pretty much to the listener, in my opinion. I'm not saying that one format is better than the other, because I would never tell a painter you should paint only on a canvas because paper doesn't look better. There's a number of factors involved in how we perceive the sound quality, and most of the times I believe that it has nothing to do with the sound itself. In my case, I have compared only a couple of Blu-ray releases against the vinyl releases, one of them being the Pale Communion record by Opeth, and I must say that the sound was pretty similar in both formats, with the vinyl getting a slight edge in the deeper end, at least in my sound stereo. That being said, I would certainly love to see the audio Blu-ray format to thrive, because it's something that would be great to have as another option.
And one thing I'll just add quick to that is, some people will say that, a 128 MP3 on laptop speakers sounds fine. So no, the listener's not always right. I get where your point is, but some listeners don't deserve to have an opinion, as mean as that sounds in that discussion. But there are some people there who are so oblivious to that even the worst sounds fine, and they won't, they'll swear there's no difference. But yeah, certainly.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but there's also just the time and place factor. I mean, you just talked about Steven Wilson. Steven Wilson just remastered several Marillion albums and released them on 5.1. Brave is one of them. One of my favorite albums of all time. Even the original David Megan mix sounds fantastic to me. I'm gonna get that, because it's an amazing album. It's gonna sound amazing because of Steven Wilson, but at the same time, I want to listen to it when I run, and I can't do that with 5.1 Blu-ray or an LP. You know,
It comes with CDs.
See, and that's the thing, though. There is a time and place for everything, and there's no question that the digital is the most versatile of the formats, the most portable of the formats. But if you're strictly speaking as to what sounds the best, you know, that shouldn't really even be in the discussion in most cases.
I think
but there's also going to be preference.
I think the other problem is to go from, you know, just simple stereo to a 5.1 surround mix. It's not an easy thing either. You know, same with vinyl, where you get bands who do a mix for digital and CD and then a mix master, whatever, for vinyl. It's a whole different process to make that happen. And I think it's a numbers game where, like Gonzalo was saying, Marillion, you know, they've got it all figured out. They know that enough people will buy it that it's worth going back to the original, you know, to the master tapes and everything, and recreating the album, you know, more or less. And, you know, if a band doesn't have the right following, or the album wasn't popular enough, or whatever the case, or even for new albums going forward, if they're not popular enough, it just might not make sense to go, you know, with a master audio quality 5.1, because if people don't buy it, then it's just a waste to pay, you know, everyone who's gonna make it happen, the production of the Blu-rays, you know, everything, all of the overhead involved. It's just a music business problem at that point.
Yeah, and you know, that's a great point to end on, because at the end of the day, that is why I think vinyl has succeeded a lot, because it is a financially optimal situation. Some bands won't even bother to do a separate master. It's just a matter of, here's the audio, press it to vinyl, boom, we're done. And, you know, that is a very easy way to then make money, as opposed to 5.1 Blu-ray, which takes a lot of work to not necessarily reach a large number of people that have the setup. So I understand it. I'm upset, but, you know, I understand the comeback. I just really wish I saw more bands with some fantastic 5.1s. So that's it. Let's wrap up the vinyl there. We can always revisit this topic in the future. There's so many little nuanced side topics that we got into there and could really explore more in the future. But let's go back, one last musical band topic here, and go into something that came out January 26th of this year on Century Media. It is a band I was only vaguely familiar with, Orphaned Land. The album is Unsung Prophets and Dead Messiahs. So I'm going to start with our resident expert Gonzalo on this. Tell us a little bit about the new album. Why should we be picking it up?
Oh man, I don't even know where to begin on this one.
Okay, well then on to Austin. No, I'm kidding. Continue.
no, it's a band that's only been on my periphery for about 15 years, and they've been around since the early 90s. And their big thing is geopolitical. Their big thing is, and this relates to the geography of where they're from. They're Israeli, right there in the name Orphaned Land. So their thing, like their entire thematic central thing, has been to create a sense of unity amongst the Abrahamic religions that have traditionally been at war with each other. And in a lot of ways, they've succeeded. One of the things about this band musically is that they're able to take that approach and make it come to life within the context of progressive death metal. And you hear that with like the combination of like Arab strings and singing in Hebrew and Hebrew choirs, and but like still a very, very heavy metal sound. And it's something that when I first heard literally made me drop my jaw. So the new album is a lot more political in nature, and I don't know if we're going to be able to get into the details of it. But why don't you go ahead and ask me a couple questions before I get a little crazy about this?
All right. Well, let me say this. You were talking about the local flavor in the album, and I like a lot of it musically. But let me just say, warn anybody else who has been to a fair amount of Orthodox services, the chanting cuts right through me. I have such flashbacks to attending Orthodox services that every time I hear it, like, it's just part of me wants to shut that out. It's a great part of it, but it just grates on me. But otherwise, I love the local flavors of their sound. And I had one of their older albums. I got All Is One. I checked this one out now. I love those elements, you know, that distinctly come from that area. I think that's really cool. And Joel, I know you're a big fan, so why don't you lead us in with your thoughts on the album?
Well, actually, Orphaned Land for me is some sort of a rekindled love. After the departure of guitarist and co-founder Yossi Sassi, I really didn't know what they could come up with. There was a fair amount of time between the previous album, All Is One, and this new record, and right off the bat, I have to say that I certainly miss Yossi Sassi's tasteful solos, and the album somehow lacks the depth of guitar work that he is very well known for. But on the other hand, there's so much sophistication, happiness, anger, joy, and a bunch of sentiments surfacing on each track that even though they don't pack the punch that they used to in terms of cheer and novelty, this band continues to demonstrate that they are among the best bands in the world with the power and the depth of their writings. Certainly, Unsung Prophets and Dead Messiahs is so incredibly diverse that no once have felt bored, or as if the songs began to sound the same. And probably you can write this up to the vast variety of instruments, which admittedly is truly impressive, but I believe that the band's songwriting skills are really the true driving force in this album.
And Gonzalo, I'm going to get to you. I know you have some comments. But I just want to say that I do find, I'm not necessarily a fan of death metal, but the growly vocals are at a minimum, and when they do kind of border on that, they don't get heavy into it on the record, but they do it in a fantastic fashion that, even I, as not being a huge fan of it, really do enjoy. So, Gonzalo, what were your thoughts?
Well, I wanted to echo what Joel said. When Yossi Sassi left the band several years ago, I thought that the band was over because Yossi and Colby have been the heart and soul of this band since its inception in the early 90s. So I made it a point to not listen to anything off of this album except for that one video that was made until it arrived in the mail. And honestly, it slams start to finish. It's a journey. It's incredible. Yossi's guitar work is lacking, but at the same time, the work that Ken Balbus and the new Gaid and Amsalem have been, the way that they collaborate with their own different instruments, there's a lot more texture there. There's a lot more, that sense of sophistication isn't gone. It doesn't shred like it used to, but it's been replaced with something else. And honestly, like the solos are an afterthought.
Austin?
That said, I came into the band at sort of an interesting point. I got into them when I saw Century Media share the video for Brother off of the last album, All Is One, and that was pretty much right after Yossi Sassi had left the band, and that song to me is their crowning achievement, Brother, off of All Is One. And after listening to the new album last night, I'd say track one, The Cave, is kind of the same thing on a different level. They have two crowning achievements now, but for different reasons. Anyway, but Yossi Sassi, it's almost sort of like for lack of something else to compare it to, it's a Spock's Beard and Neil Morse sort of thing, where you're sad when one departs, but now you've kind of got two of a good thing, because Yossi Sassi has been very, very busy since leaving Orphaned Land. And I came in right when his album Melting Clocks was the new one, and before his 2014 album Desert Butterflies came out. And he's put together his own band. He's borrowing Marty Friedman, and if anybody's ever heard of that guy, on occasion. And I mean, he's putting out really good stuff as well. So now it's like, now that Orphaned Land has come back with a successor to All Is One, that is a very solid album. Yes, I miss Yossi's contributions to their sound, but I think they're both doing very well without each other, to the point that I'm okay. It's like two parents being divorced and you go spend weekends at dad's house or something. It's like they're both pretty cool, so I'm all right with that. But as far as the new album, again, same with Frequency Drift. I listened to it last night in a late night cram session, and I thought it was going to be good, but I didn't think it was going to be that good. I mean, when you've got Steve Hackett and Hansi Kirsch guesting on your album, you're doing okay, I think. And I think our listeners should just take our word for it and just take a listen themselves, because they hit the geopolitical stuff perfectly well. Sort of the angst at the way the world is becoming resonates with a lot of us, I feel like. And musically, it's just fantastic. And like you said, Nick, the growling is done tastefully enough that I don't think it will scare off most listeners. But it's a very solid album that I look forward to listening to more often.
All right, Joel?
Something that really stood up to me is that at least a solid half of the album might be probably considered more equivalent to rock than to metal. But again, their ability to fuse these metallic attributes with classic and pro rock is certainly buttery smooth. Their proclivity, to put it in a way, for mixing that metal songwriting with this strikingly visionary dosage of spirituality that somehow conveys some sort of a monumental message of hope is really remarkable. Plain and simple. For my money, this record is already album of the year material. And if you even care slightly about epic metal music with emotion and intellect, there's no excuse for you not to own this brilliant record.
Wow, that's strong stuff, bringing out the album of the year discussion in a January release. That's treading on some tricky ground there, but
yeah, Nick, I know that could be like some sort of a strong statement, but I'm saying this. I'm yet to hear this well-done album in the metal area, at least combining prog with metal, with classic, with everything in between, that strikes me better than this record, at least in 2018. It could be that there's something coming out that is as bombastic and special as this album sounds to my ears, but as I said already, this is album of the year material. Probably not the best metal album of the year, but right there.
Well, Gonzalo, I'm guessing that you're probably not going to disagree too strongly.
I don't disagree at all. It's an incredible record for so many reasons, but I do want to get back to the geopolitical aspect of it. As far as I know, this is the first time that they have touched on the geopolitical stuff outside the Middle East. The very last song, the manifest, the epilogue, is an homage to a guy named Victor Jara. Now, Victor Jara was a protest singer from Chile in the early 1970s, and he was assassinated by Augusto Pinochet's regime. And in many ways, he's kind of like the Bob Dylan of Chile, with the added complication that the government had him offed. Hearing Victor Jara's music sung, having his words sung in Spanish by a Jewish choir at the very end of the Manifest song set chills down my spine. And then when that song was over, and then the epilogue to the song Epilogue began with Victor Jara's music, with George Orwell's words being read over it, I mean, I have no words. It's an incredibly moving moment. And if anybody's at all familiar with South American, politics of the 20th century, it resonates.
That 20th century South America, that's when Stalin came in, right?
Not quite, dude.
Am I off there? Okay, I might be a little off, but yes, they are certainly a band that has that, political aspect to them, and it's nice to have that from, a band that is in the middle of, obviously, so much conflict over the years. It's almost obvious that you'd think that is going to come into things and saturate into the music. Now, one thing, as a new listener to this album, and listening to it to prep just for this, the first time I listen to something very often, I will avoid looking at the track list. I will avoid looking at any notes. I just want to hear the music for the first time. And I got to a track, and I thought, man, he really sounds like Hansi Kirsch on this. and of course, it gets a little bit more through, so I'm like, holy crap, that's Hansi. And did he freaking nail that song? I was so happy with that track. It's probably my favorite. It's as an outsider, it almost seems too obvious that I like the song with Hansi, but man, did he have a cool guest appearance on that, and they had some others as well. But Joel, you had some thoughts?
Yeah, I was about to say that I don't know if you guys are familiar with this German TV program named Vocalists. And whether you are or not, they have produced a 1 hour long documentary called All Is One, and it's actually based on Orphaned Land. It has an English version as well as a German version, and basically the documentary is about the band's philosophy, claiming that they're all three big religious groups, the Christians, the Muslims, and the Jews, have the same origin, and the filmmakers visited Israel to follow the band's path and to get a more personal inside view of each musician live by visiting them at home, getting to know their families, learning about their daily routine, and in the documentary they are trying to get the audience beyond this endless discussion about the conflicts in the Middle East by taking a far more humane approach to all of it.
And I think, you see so many bands in the genre that I think such a documentary would be pretty enlightening or fulfilling, as opposed to, I hate to rip on pop, but you do the same thing for, say, Justin Bieber, and I don't think you're going to have quite as much substance or aren't going to be quite as enlightened as to what's behind the curtain there. But Gonzalo, you had a thought on the growling?
Yeah, before I get onto the growling, though, I am aware of that documentary that Joel was talking about. I've seen bits and pieces of it. It is worth your time. I haven't even finished watching it, and it is worth checking out. But about the growls, it's worth noting that the previous album, All Is One, was the very first Orphaned Land album that had no death growls on it, none whatsoever.
And I was so happy about that.
You see, and then so to hear the death metal growls on Unsung Prophets, Dead Messiahs was I welcomed it because I think that it adds a good dimension to it. At the Gates' singer Tompa Lindberg guests on one of the last songs on the album, Only the Dead Have Seen the End of War, and if there are any At the Gates fans out there that haven't checked it out, maybe you ought to think about it.
All right. Austin, what did you think about some of the guest appearances on there? I already mentioned Hansi, but also Steve Hackett's on a track. Did you expect that?
Well, the funny thing is, for me, Hansi's kind of been a common thread throughout this entire conversation. He was on Ayreon Universe. He's one of Blind Guardian Beyond the Red Mirror is one of the very few new from the store shrink-wrapped vinyl records I have, and then here he is on Orphaned Land as well.
And it's worth noting he is German, as is Frequency Drift.
There you go, across the board. So it's like the universe is telling me more Blind Guardian. No, I think, on one hand, Steve Hackett seems to be everywhere lately. I mean, he's doing a lot of guest appearances, and to the point where, I worry it might cheapen it soon if he does too many. That said, it's still a little bit like seeing a unicorn, that there's still some magic left to it. And, I mean, for a band like Orphaned Land, who puts out, one album every 5 to 8 years on average or something, to get Steve Hackett to appear is no small feat. I mean, I think he added to the song. His style blended well with theirs. I would have liked a little bit more out of Hansi on his song. I mean, he got some cool moments, but I hate when something special isn't quite as special as it could be, if that makes sense. But that said, the guest appearances weren't so much that it detracts from the core of Orphaned Land themselves. I think it was done tastefully enough that it doesn't become a sideshow act.
So when this hopefully ends up on Blabbermouth, I can see the headline already is going to be Unknown Prog Contributor Calls Steve Hackett a Musical Whore, which is this kind of the subtext I got from that.
I called him a unicorn as well. Thank you very much. Take that, Blabbermouth.
He's just guesting on everything. He's the next Mike Portnoy. No.
Oh, let's not even go there.
Oh, we'll have one day. We'll have one of these that's just all dedicated to Portnoy and his projects, there's so much there to be covered.
420 is coming up,
but so it is his birthday. So So we've got a lot of ground covered here. Let me end this topic and kind of wrap things up with Gonzalo, since she's the big Orphaned Land fan. This new album, where does it sit in your ranking with all the others? Where do you put it?
Yeah, no, I honestly, they just keep getting better. Even as members of the band that got it off the ground in the first place drop away, they're now down to 2, Kobe the singer and Uri the bass player. Even as the rest of the guys leave, the band keeps getting more solid somehow. I don't know how they do it, but I'm grateful for it. This might be my favorite album by them.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I would agree there.
Oh, wow. That's strong words. We got 2 out of 3. Joel, are you going to say it's your favorite of theirs so far?
Actually, it's a tie with All Is One, but definitely this one is a record to have in your collection. It's the kind of album that the more you listen to it, the more you love. It is so well balanced, well thought out, and it gives this appreciation to culture, religion, social politics, and history cleverly mixed in their own recipe for music. Remains catchy and accessible. It remains catchy and accessible, and at the same time allows you for maximum enjoyment as an standalone album of its own. Yes, the fact that Justice Sass is no longer on board is something that certainly could put off some people because he was an integral part of the band, but Unsung, Prophet, and Dead Messiahs continues to move this band forward into a more and more successful metal act, appealing to metal and across the board for a far wider number of subgenres.
All right, well, that's a good wrap-up. Thank you guys for coming out tonight and chatting with me here and doing the inaugural Talking Perspectives episode. Thank you everyone who listened with us. I hope you'll add your comments in on Facebook or wherever you want to so we can get your insights on all these topics. Once again, I am Nick Andrews. I was here tonight with Joel Barrios, Austin Coquel, and Gonzalo Pozo. We were talking about Ayreon, Frequency Drift, Orphaned Land, and the comeback of vinyl. We hope you'll subscribe to our podcast so you get all the future Talking Perspectives, as well as, interviews, reviews, and all that we do on there. And of course, don't forget to follow on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night.